Okay, so I'm creating this video to give you um, just some pointers. Sorry, my alarm's going off. Some pointers at kind of how to work with a set of user interface controls. So we've got text boxes and combo boxes. There are obviously other controls that could fit into this same mix. Um, Managing an individual control is not difficult. Managing a set of controls is a little more difficult. And there's some easier and harder ways to do it. And so I would try to show you what I think is an easier way to do it. Um, First of all, you've got to be clear about what does managing them mean. And there's a set of tasks. There are not too many, but there's a set of tasks that you've got to take care of for them to behave the way you want them to behave, particularly related to validation. So you can see on the screen here, I've got a very similar set of controls, fewer, but similar to what you have. And you've got to decide on some rules. So I would recommend that this add button be disabled whenever the values of these controls here are not perfectly ready to add a record. So that keeps you from ever going down the code routines that will end up adding the record when there's a condition that makes adding the record, not good. So you want to make sure that you don't enable the path of logic for adding the controls, or sorry, for adding the data values until all of these user interface controls are ready for that. And similarly on clear, the clear button ought to be enabled anytime there's a non-default condition here. If this text box is blank, and this selection is clear or empty, the clear button ought to be disabled because there's no need to clear when these are in their default condition. And so you've got two buttons that you want to enable in the right conditions, and that's and the logic for that is based on a combination of the state of these controls. So if I run this app, then all I've done so far is just put these controls on the design surface. I haven't done any, there's no events, taking place. So in this state, um, the add button should not be enabled, and the clear button should not be enabled. The add because that's not a valid set of data to add, and clear because there's nothing to clear. So to do that, I would recommend going into your code, and you can do this in your form main constructor for now. Later we may move it, but I would say let's create an initialize form method. And I would say we could write code in here to do button add enabled equals false, button clear enabled equals false, which that would be at the job done. So let's run that. So this is good. But when I start adding some text, the clear button ought to right away be enabled. So even if I just have one character in there, clear button ought to be enabled. So that gets you to um, a situation where you've got to you got to figure out, well, how can you sorry, I'm resetting my alarm here. How can you handle those conditions? How are you able to, at every point during the life cycle of this form, be able to manage um, whether those buttons should be enabled or disabled? And the key is going to be handling the events that take place in these text boxes and the combo box. And the events that you need to handle are going to be basically the default events for the controls. I'll show you how to add those. It's real simple. Um, you add an event for a text box. There's more than one way to do it. I'm going to show you here on text box 1 um, this event. This right here is the events, and normally it will come in here, and if you haven't already selected something, it's going to give you a hint at what the default event should be, and in this case it's the text changed event. Just like a button has a click event, you've got all of these events that you can handle on the text box. There's a ton of them. And you should, over time, you should learn. There's going to be a few, maybe 10% of these that you'll end up doing something with. But so kind of learn what are the important events for a text box. More than likely, most of the time, you're just going to be handling the text change event. Now, I'm going to add this event a few different ways. One is you can just, so I'm not going to do it, but if I double click right here on this, not this side, but this side over here, the left side of that um, list of events, it would put the default, or actually it would put the text changed event handler in there for you. So I'm just going to do that. And you can see it added this event. So what it does is a few things involved. One is it's going to write this code for you, which basically means you can just start coding right here in that event handler. The other thing it does at the same time is in this designer class, or this designer file, which has a partial class, just like over here, you've got the other partial class, and you can have as many partial class files as you want to, so long as they have this, they're for that same class. So they just put this stuff back here to get it out of your way, and hopefully to keep you from editing it. But you can see on this text box, it added with this operator a new event handler, which is this event handler right here. So if I right click on that and go to definition, it's going to position us at this handler. So the next one, I'm going to just double click on this. And right away you see it puts it puts the default event handler. And so text changed is the default handler for a text box. So on this one, I came down here and double clicked text change. If I double click resize, it's going to add the resize handler in here for me. Of course, we don't need to handle the resize event, so I'm going to go ahead and take it out. And just so you know, you look back here in the designer, right here, and there's the resize event. So, and it'll just keep adding them in there. This plus equals basically means to add a handler to the set of handlers that are listening for the resize event. So you could put another one in there if you wanted to. Um, we'll just do that. There, resize 2. Doesn't exist yet. Resize 2. Why we would need 2 separate handlers, I don't know. Maybe you do. You want to segregate some code. Um, the, the framework supports that. So I'm going to go back into the designer on text box 2. Go to the events. We actually looked at, maybe it's this one here. Yeah, see, so it's not going to have both of these. It's just going to have one of them in the designer. And normally you don't do that. So I'm going to go ahead and remove that. I'm going to go to the designer. You can see it removed. Actually removed both of them. So the behaviors here are a little bit different. I'm kind of unfamiliar with some of it. So, okay. So just to see where we're at on these events. So you've got the text box 1 event is going to text change. The text box 2 is going to text 2 text change. The combo box, so when I click the control here, it selects the property window changes. So if you watch right here, as I change my position on the user interface, it changes the property window. So that's really handy. You can also change it here. I'm going to change to combo 1, and you'll see over here it'll select combo 1. So these two are tied together, and that's very handy. So the combo box, if I double click the combo box, it's going to wire up an event handler for the default event. Again, I could come over here and double click here and it would do this event, but I'm not interested in, figuring out which is the event that I want to handle, but I can just come over here and double click it. And you can see it wires up the selected index changed event, which basically means what is the index of the selected value in the list of values in the combo box. The selected index is just like a position in an array. So we'll leave that in place. And you can see I've got my 4 event handlers in here. And let's see, why do I have 4? Oh, I still got this resize event. So let's get it. And so that is on text 1. So go in here. Oh, interesting. So when I took this out earlier, it was able to remove the resize 2 event because that was the last one that was wired up. Here, I can just go in here and delete this because even though this event handler still exists, it's not referred to back here. There's no resize event here. It removed that line of code. So we can safely remove this and not have a compile problem because there's no designer code that is pointing to this handler. Okay, so now we've got our 3 events that were of interest, which basically are going to give us an opportunity to do stuff anytime the text changes on either of the text boxes or the selection changes here. That's when we need to evaluate the state of the user interface. So what we need to do when the text changes is determine how to enable or disable the add, and clear buttons. And so you're going to put logic in here. And even though we're focused in this event handler on text 1 and this one in text 2 and this one in combo 1, you've got to handle in each of these the state of all three of them, because the enabling or disabling of these buttons is dependent on the state of all three of them. So what we want is to enable the add button anytime this text box is non-blank, this text box is non-blank, and this combo box has a value selected, not an empty value. That's when, actually, those are AND conditions. All three of those have to be true to enable the button. On the clear, we want to enable the clear button using an OR condition when this is non-blank, or this is non-blank, or this is has a selection. So for the add button, it has to be, all three have to be non-blank essentially. And for the clear button, only one of them has to be non-blank. So that's kind of the logic involved. So we are in initialized form doing this. We'll change that here in just a bit. So you could write all that logic here and here and here to handle these buttons, but it's better if you consolidate it, because you're gonna want to write it in one place. So I would say we can write a method, and it needs to be a Boolean enable add button, and enable clear button. See, it's writing it for us, which is kind of nice. Oops. And these are not happy because we're not returning a value. See, we're supposed to return a value. So we'll just come down here and return false on both of these for now to get the event handler methods happy. Okay. And so then in here, you just have to call those two methods. So you can say button add dot enabled equals enable add button, and button clear enabled equals enable clear button. And you copy that code into these places. Now, it's anywhere you can see replicated code, it's better to not have it. So we'll come back to how to eliminate that later. But here, enable add button, you're going to want to do something like this. If text1.text length, this is one way to do it, is greater than 0, and text2.text length is greater than 0, and the one selected index is greater than 0. Return true. So you could put an else in here if you wanted to. Usually I don't when it's this simple. So you just like, if these three things are true, we're going to return true. Otherwise, we return false. So let's just run that. Okay, we're just going to run that. And so we're going to be watching the add button. I'm just going to put a character in here. And the text event changed. I didn't see this get enabled. So let's debug that. Let's set a breakpoint on text changed on text 1. Set that breakpoint. And come in here and text. Okay, so the text change event worked. This is enabled. Let's see what we're doing wrong. Okay, so this actually, the logic is correct because the length of this one is 1, but this one's 0, and this selected index is nothing selected yet. So whether nothing is selected or the blank is selected, either one of those. So not -1 basically on the control means that there's no index. No selection has occurred. So this is actually working fine. So I'm going to type in another S in here. Still no add button. And then I'm going to select an item here. Now my add button is enabled. So that's what we want. So I should be able to come up here and blank this out. And got my breakpoint here still. And it should disable that button. So now I can just, go forward and back. And that's working correctly. Okay, so now we can actually leave this running. So I will. And come in here and set a breakpoint here, enable the clear button. Now I'm going to go ahead and make a change so we are executing the code, because if I just start writing code in here while the form has not fired an event where I'm executing the code, then this code may not recompile dynamically until there's a breakpoint set, and then it can do it. But I've already got a breakpoint set, and this is going to allow this code to be modified and recompiled right as we're building it here. So the logic is going to be very similar. I'm going to grab that and copy them here. But this needs to be ors instead of ands. Okay? So if any of them have a value, a non-default value, okay, so our little hitch in the video there. This is where that F10 was interrupting my video again, so let's use F11. Okay. So now both of them are enabled. And so when I backspace on this S here, it turns off the add button. Backspace here turns off that. And then when I select this, it should turn off the clear button. I need to change the drop-down style. So it seems like these are working fine. So I'm just going to let you just kind of look at the code here. We're handling the text changed event. We're handling this text change event. And in each one of them, we are running a method to enable the add button and clear button. So I think I'm going to stop here. This video has been a little bit messy. And we'll pick up on the next one. And we'll be continuing to make a few more changes to this. Okay.